Future of Health series here. I'm just filling in for Rob, who got delayed on a flight, or I think got canceled. So a little bit of change, but we're still doing this. As we've just discussed, fire, ready, aim is a good way to start it off. So I'll kind of hand it over to Tracy. So if you'd love to kind of maybe introduce yourself, since you're really the center point of everybody here, so I'll pass it over to you.
All right. So this Monday, I'll just read off the paper. Robert Ian Bonnick, the host of this event for the last 50 panels, 500 panels, close to 5 years. It says, the Future of Health series this Monday is curated by HHB Bali. It's a health tourism platform, and SpeakuP Monday, featuring Bali as the epicenter for the integrative health model. HHB is a health tourism initiative and has a focus on creating next level health through HHB Health Journeys. Whether you like to know more about what Bali has to offer now or what options are available to support optimising your stay here in Bali, this episode will hold valuable answers. So the purpose of this show that we have, usually it's to connect people, and it has got social initiatives, but the first Monday of each month, its focus is health. This usually, it's been what would you call the Future of Health series, the Future of Integrative Medicine, and sometimes we have conversations that matter, and tonight is one of those conversations that matter. The focus on the three words is trauma, grief, and art. So now we will start with Blake introducing himself, and then Calvin go through it.
All right, thank you. My name is Blake Fisher. I'm an artist, but I spent 10 years in the Marine Corps, and I found processing my trauma, grief, PTSD, depression, anxiety, whatever you want to call it, through artwork. And with that there's a, rather than a simple process of how you get over it, it's more than just that. It's it can be measurable and it can be duplicated. And so that's kind of my journey here, and to be here in Bali.
Hello, I'm Calvin. I'm actually from Singapore. Recently just moved to Bali. So I'm an art psychotherapist by practice. My background is in fine arts. How I ended up here, it's because I was working in a hospice in Singapore for a number of years. And prior to that, how I became an art therapist is that I have used my own art practice to process my own grief. So it's from a practitioner-based perspective that I start to learn about the benefits and the effects of what art can do. Yeah.
Sorry. It's okay. Okay, I'm Venita Eng. I'm a medical doctor from Indonesia, and I'm focusing on palliative care because I believe in the quality of life for a patient despite serious illness. Even at the end of life, every patient and their family deserve to be cared for and be free from pain and suffering. So that's why I'm here in Bali. After practicing for about 10 years in Jakarta, I think it's time for Bali and the eastern part of Indonesia also to have access to this kind of care. Thank you.
And my name is Tracy Grunewald. I'm the founder of HHB Bali. It's a platform to connect people to better health. It's also a health tourism venture. So what it is, when we say connecting people, we're talking about the clinics, the hospitals, the protocols, the health resorts, what testing, and like my background prior to this is mainly in functional medicine and somatics.
We'll start off with a first topic, and that's going to be the neuroscience and the perspective of trauma, grief, and art. So the body it perceives trauma as binary. So it is not a matter of how hard it was, how bad it was. The body perceives it is trauma or it is not. And so that's something that I would say that a lot of people don't understand. So that's one facet of it. I'd love to pass it off to one of you guys to, again, or jump in whenever you have, if I'm wrong, or you would like to say something else. And the same could be probably said for grief as well. And so I would love for you to maybe jump in there if you would.
Okay, thank you. So my take on it is we acknowledge that grief and trauma affect the brain as a pain, as a suffering. It affects the part of the brain, amygdala, prefrontal cortex, which is linked with emotion, cognition, and pain as well. And as a physician, we see human not just about the body. Like you said, it's not about the biological body only, physical, but also about psychological, social, and even spiritual aspect. So in order for human to be able to thrive, despite of trauma and grief, because eventually everyone, we will go through some level of trauma and grief itself. What we can support in medical field is also to help anticipate, help to be there for patient and family, acknowledge their pain, and to journey with them despite of the grief and trauma they are facing, in hope that they will be able to journey with it in a natural way, in a productive way, and grow out of it, and not let the grief and trauma to spiral into a disorder or a disease.
Would you say, you mentioned something interesting about the spiritual aspect of that. Where do you see that connecting in, this part of art? Why did you say spiritual?
Okay, so spiritual, maybe you can also add on it. For what I know is spiritual goes beyond religion and rituals.
Yep.
It's more about how human will perceive their meaning, their purpose and meaning. And by having there are many journals and studies that have proven that when somebody has a strong root and grounding about their own individual purpose and meaning, it will help them to cope with many distress in life, including in this thing is grief and trauma. And it has been, I think many studies have been revealed that practices and rituals to some extent may help some individuals.
So before we got up here, you'd mentioned something about Indonesians or maybe Bali and of how they perceive and do things. So I'd love for you to share that.
Okay, so as you know, maybe what unique is Indonesia is a religious country, by means that everyone in Indonesia must have a religion, and it's stated in their identity card even, or their KTP. So in a way, it's kind of like causing some, I'm not saying bias, but it's a challenge and opportunity in itself. But it means that people in Indonesia, especially Bali, are exposed to spirituality every day. In the morning, even when you are walking on the street, you can see some forms of worship or spirituality on the street even. So in that sense, what I think in Bali, we need to acknowledge that it is a strong part of their life. It is a strong part of their identity, and how we can embrace that as a part for the growth, for psychological, emotional growth for the people in Bali as well. So I'm more like seeing as an opportunity, because in Bali, it is more accessible, more open to it. People are more open to talk about it, and it is a safe space for people to explore even their own spirituality.
Cool, thank you. Well, Calvin, I'd like to chat with you about that trauma, grief, and art. So I feel like that's really up your alley in what you do. Can you explain to maybe, and also the spiritual side of it as well? So like, tell us a little bit of what you do and how it works.
Trauma and grief, it's, from my own understanding, is that it's very subjective. What I've learned over the years is that everyone is expert of your own loss, which also means that it cannot be duplicated by another person. It has to be experienced by you and you alone. And from your perspective, how you feel about it, it's absolutely the truth and correct. And from that angle, when we introduce art as a way to process it. Okay, I'm going to use a hand model by Dr. Dan Siegel to kind of hope to illustrate this a little bit. So when we have the hand, so this portion is the brainstem, which is the function part of the brain. Right, and then when we have our time closing in, this is the mammalian brain, and this is where the emotion part. So the top, when we close it, it hugs the component of the brain. So that's the neocortex. So this is your cognitive function. So when trauma happens, there's this. He uses this term flip the lid. Essentially, that's the disconnect. right? You cannot make functional sense of anything. Your emotions and your everyday function becomes disconnect from your cognitive processing. So what art does is that it draws what is here. It gives form and shape to what is happening here so that the cognitive processing, the neocortex, can close this gap, can bridge it back again. And this is not a one-time thing. So to create this sense of safety for someone who have undergone trauma, it takes a lot of safety protocols. Sometimes it also means making the person feel safe in a space, right? To be able to revisit a traumatic experience through maybe recreating the scene in the artwork. And then so that through that they are able to narrate what their preferred outcome could be without being judged. And through that, they are able to build this sense of inner resilience. So again, it's very subjective to the person experiencing it themselves, even for grief. So this is why it's very important for art therapists to take on the role of a witness and an observer to support the creative process unfolding itself. I'm not sure if that, yeah.
That was well said. So I have another question. So since you're an artist, I'm an artist. And I know it works. And, you know, like as I love to do it, I get joy out of painting. I get joy out of people enjoying what I've made. I mean, it's incredible. So how do you measure that for, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot and we've chatted before a little bit, but how do you measure that for somebody who's experienced trauma and then to like move past that? Or what's your best guess or what's your thought there?
Well, that's a tough one. Measuring an outcome in art, my personal take is that sometimes it's very difficult to have them sitting on the same platform, because when you start measuring something, there would be this expected trajectory, expected path, or this third element that would influence how you would behave in the setting. And I feel, I use the word feel because a lot of time it's about the person making the art and the art itself and the creative process. If you start measuring it unconsciously, there would be this awareness that the creative process is being tracked. And I do believe that it will alter the outcome, no matter how small. It almost feels like you have a camera in a room when you are trying to have a 1:1 session and then you pretend that there's no camera. I know a lot of professionals, they do this as a way of learning, as a way to review what is going on in the session so that you can bring it to supervision to process it later. But for art therapists, a lot of time what we do is that we bring the artwork. We bring the artwork back into supervision and then we discuss about the work, because there's this innate belief that when someone makes a piece of work, there's a lot of projection. And with that projection, everything that needs to be understood is in the work, and everything that is left out that needs to be understood is also in the work. So a lot of time, when we talk with client, we process their emotions, their inner world through the work. So how I would present it to the medical team that I used to work is, imagine a triangle. So at the bottom of the triangle, there's three sides to the triangle. So we have the artist, we have the art therapist, and then we have the artwork. So a lot of time when we communicate is through the artwork. So the top of the triangle is the artwork. So we go up and then we go down. But that cannot happen without a good therapeutic relationship. So the more we understand the person making the work, the better we would be able to support. It also will demyth the fact that if you paint certain things, I can read your mind. That is not true. That is not true.
Well done. Thank you.
Yeah. So what I'd be saying is that we're going into a space that we not controlling. It's an uncontrolled space. When we talk about connection, often when we have, say, with palliative or hospice, is that people have lost connection with themselves. So it's the same with the trauma. They're living through this story. In my world, it's like we've got the limbic and the amygdala, and we've got the cognitive. So what happens is there's space in between. That people have a trauma maybe from little, but it keeps playing out in their life. but it's not. They know that. They could be some executive, they could be whatever, they're intelligently not an issue, but there's a trigger. And it's in this space, in a little millisecond of time, that story is triggered. So how do we neutralise this? And this is where we're using different tools here in Bali, like art, that we can, it's a health journey. Not one modality, but it's a whole journey. And people, we say, introduce to themselves. They get to know themselves and they recognise that actually was not a problem. It doesn't.
Yeah.
They create a different life.
Well said. Jenny. All right, we hit it to art as a healing tool and emotional language. I feel like that was perfectly said. Also, if there are any questions, please, yes, sir. Can we get a mic over? I don't know. Do we typically save questions till the end, or how do we?
Keep that question there.
All right, sorry. Keep that question, sir. Thank you. All right. Well, we're going to kind of moving into our kind of third point here of transforming pain into growth. And maybe some of you are familiar. There's a Navy SEAL in the U.S. named David Goggins who has this quote. He says, "Do something painful every day." And that kind of is I'll have a mantra that I do. I do something, if it's working out or if it's whatever it is, getting in some cold exposure, something, meditating, whatever that is, and that in some ways avoids whatever trauma, whatever issue you have later in the day. You already did something really difficult, and you got it out of the way, so everything else is easier. And that's why I'd love for you two to pose your 2 points if you start.
Thank you. So, in a way, I agree with that because from a medical point of view, biologically, humans need stress. So, for example, our bone, if you are not you are not walking for a few days, few weeks, what will happen? Your muscle will shrink. Your bone will be crippled. And it will not grow well. So you need some level of pressure for a good life, for a good growth. That's why you cannot avoid stress altogether. Some also in our brain. A little bit of stress actually helps our brain to grow with neuroplasticity, but too much of it will be a disruption to your brain, as so to your bone and muscle. Too much of pressure to your bone and muscle will break it. So it's a nice level of homeostasis, a balance between a good stress, what we would say. But I do believe in that sense, when trauma and grief, I said initially that it's linked with some level of pain emotionally in our brain. When we journey with it and we travel through it, going through it, we will grow as a better person. We will grow psychologically, mentally, and even our brain function. So we don't avoid grief or even trauma, but with the modalities that we are talking about here and how we can journey with it in a healthy way. Thank you.
Transforming pain into growth. I will try to explain this using my understanding from this process painting method that I use for grief bereavement group. So it's if you want to Google, you can run a Google EDPP Alduande process painting. It's developed by an American art therapist. So how it works is that there's a single canvas, and then this participants will be painting over and over on this single canvas for an extended duration of time. The key to this is about the process, and what happens at some point is that you realize the canvas cannot hold that amount of materials and paint, and then you will need to start deconstructing. Deconstructing something that you've built, it's not an easy process. But at the same time, alongside this creative process, we call it the cycle of layering. So imagine stage 1, 2, 3, 4. Stage 1 is the impulse to add something. Stage 2 is the unknown. You are not sure where it's going. Stage 3 is where you start to add layering. And stage 4, it's meaning making. Meaning making, unfortunately or fortunately, is not the pinnacle. We don't need to go there, because if we engage in the process 1, 2, 3, and it oscillates 3 to 1, it will create this sensation that is very uncomfortable, because you need to take down something that you've done before to put in something new. if we look at it from an archetypal perspective, the whole image of a destroyer. Destroyer, normally when we link it to anything to a destroyer, it becomes something that is not good, right? But at the same time, the archetype of a destroyer promotes growth afterwards. It tears down something that was before, and then it promotes something new afterwards. So this whole tension point about discomfort and comfort, it's, I believe, through the Adwande process painting method is where growth will happen. When you are able to embrace the pain, so you acknowledge that something is there that needs to be taken down, and then you move something new in there. So that creative process itself is what or at least what I would term as growth within the spectrum of the process painting method. Yeah.
Wow, love that. I was another question for you as well is that do you have because like a lot of traumas is pain mentally a lot of the time. So do you have any particular unique experience or kind of that you've had, either of you, and I think yours is interesting as well because you're helping people like process trauma through your art. You're helping people, I feel like, in the palliative care where people are closer to the end of life, typically in a lot of pain. And so it's it kind of doing similar things, but for different reasons, different people in different ages. So do you have any interesting experiences that would be unique to share?
Yes, for people at the end of life, what I see is generally we know the concept of total pain, but it's especially true at the end of life, where pain is not just about what is happening biologically, not only with your tumor, not only with your lung, with your heart, with your muscle, but also what we call as emotional pain and even spiritual pain. It all adds up to the whole sensation of pain. And people at the end of life, what I also see, maybe just like also what you said, what I've seen from them is like they are compressing like 60 years of life experiences, life regrets, life trauma, life pain. It's all compressed in their brain. It's playing like a movie in their head for hours, for many days. So it adds up to their suffering, more beyond their physical condition. So that's why we need to acknowledge that they are grieving as well, what we call also anticipatory grief. Before the death itself happened, you are mourning the loss of your function. You are mourning the loss of your identity because you cannot work anymore, because maybe you cannot see your children anymore. In that sense, we need to see person as the whole. Like you said, it's about listening to them, not making assumption, but to listen to their journey. What is their pain? And if there are traumas, a collective trauma of many decades compressed in one place, we journey with them, help them to find the closure in it before they actually passing. Like the theme, including what I see, the important keyword are forgiveness and love. To forgive themselves, to forgive people, to forgive what has happened, and to make peace. What I also see, I've read in many literatures across different religions, and I see in my patient as well, they will pass only if they have made peace with themselves, with this world, with whatever has happened, and even to what is beyond death itself. Then they can pass, or what we call rest in peace. So I hope that answers some things that I've witnessed for people at the end of life care. Thank you.
Stories are what it's very memorable for me. It's journeying with this. It was in my previous workplace in Singapore. This gentleman who is actively dying, so he was referred because he has family and he has a son that he will not get to see because his prognosis is really bad, but his wife is expecting. So when the social worker, this is because in the hospice you work in a team. This is very important because the referral actually comes through the social worker. So I think Dr. Venita highlighted about the different aspects of pain. So the art therapists work alongside this group of people that addresses the different aspects of pain. So when the referral came, it's really about how we can support this young family. So when we were sitting there with this lady, what stood out for me is that the father will be absent. So how can we actually create presence despite the fact that he won't be there anymore? So we were exploring about the idea of hand cast. Literally having a hand cast of the dad in an opened, so that his palm is open, so that the child can get to touch the dad's hands after he's born. So it's about creating this. Of course, we were exploring this with the patient's wife, and then we have gotten her consent to proceed with it. So long story short, we managed to do it within the span of the same day that the referral came. And subsequently, he passed on within 48 hours. So that handcast became the legacy, because I brought it down with some other colleagues, and then it was actually at the funeral wake. But what we didn't know is that apparently this gentleman has got very distinctive hands. So his family recognizes his hands, even relatives. So that became something that they talk about and they remember this gentleman by. But what struck me, I think wanting to build on something that she mentioned about being at a place that you're ready to die. So he had a closed casket, not because it's a traumatic death, but because he wants to make a statement. He wants people to remember his God. He's a Christian, so it's a Christian funeral. I think that left an impression for me about how at peace you are at a place that you are open to leave parts of you through an artwork behind for your boy that you will not get to see, and also to make a statement in your funeral about your faith and your love for God. I think that itself, it's also allowing me to learn a lot about life, because I always will tell people that I'm supervising that patients themselves are the best teachers. I mean, there's no other place to actually learn about life than from a person who's dying.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome. Thank you for sharing. So I would say, being an artist myself, that a lot of times art is subjective, and I'm sure you've had an uphill battle a lot of times when they're like, "Hey, this art thing, is this going to do anything?" I mean, I could understand that. However, because there's a thing called an EEG, an electroencephalograph, that has the ability to measure the brain and the specific brain waves that are put off during your sleep and also when you're creating art. And there are studies that have been done where a subject is given, or in the studies, multiple people were given a piece of clay and they weren't given any instructions, and they said, just make something. And I believe, again, don't quote me exactly, but all of these people had a shift in their brains. Some of them into an alpha brainwave state, which is if you're familiar with the sleep, it's the first stage of light sleep. If your body's relaxed, it's kind of a meditative state that it shifts into when you're creating art. Sometimes it's a delta wave, but there is this shift in the brain that happens, this electrochemical shift that, in simple terms, takes the body out of fight or flight and shifts it down into this different process that turns it off, so allows the digestion to happen, allows all of these other processes to happen, and puts you out of this fight or flight mode. I'd love for you guys to share any thoughts or experiences you have in that as well. You go first.
Yeah,
Ladies first.
Agree with that, because there's also been some studies that link to the neurochemical in the brain, like you say, fight or flight. Fight adrenaline when your heart is pumping up, when your muscle is ready to run. And the other thing is when you are in a relaxed state, there will be a different set of hormones that are going on. So it has been shown in studies, and I agree with that, when you are doing meditative things, including making art, that is, I think you will, some kind of repetitive meditative art that helps you to be grounded, that helps you to regulate your emotion. It helps to release the serotonin and then even oxytocin, the hormone of love. When you feel hugged, you release oxytocin. When you're making a certain art in a good memory of your loved ones, you transform that grief into love, because basically grief is extension of love. So what I see also is that neurochemically you can help these patients who are facing trauma and grief by directing them to reframe their whole experience.
Awesome, thank you.
Art as a form of relaxation, it's something that you can do without the presence of an art therapist. I think when we were planning, art therapy service, sometimes we will make this a point to highlight the fact that art is readily accessible to anyone who wants access to it. And the reason why there's an art therapist is also because we want to do more in-depth clinical work. So this is just a disclaimer. I want to put this forward because art is a form of meditation. It's highly accessible to anyone. The fact that I came from a fine arts background, that is also the stance that I hold, that art is a way of meditation because it helps in regulation, emotional regulation. I only learned about the science when I'm training to be an art therapist. So essentially how I see it is how art therapy training makes my art practice make sense for me, and then I help other people to make sense of their own art practice, if I can put it that way. So repetitive art making is something that I realize it's also quite it brings you into the state of flow. I think we were having a short discussion about that. So that is something that's very magical. I use the word magical very loosely because it's something that I cannot quantify with any scientific terms at this point in time. It's just this state of high that you get. It almost draws you away from any form of experiencing pain. I remember when I'm working in a hospice, we have had individuals who are saying that when they are engaging in the creative process, they forget that they are actually on pain medication. I think that itself, it's a textbook example, but it's also what we are witnessing. Yeah.
Thank you.
So just going back to the transforming pain into growth, because it's not we're not talking about pain at the deathbed. It's also like you're talking ex-military guys as well. They're in incredible emotional pain or real pain. We've got a lot of tumours at the moment on the brain, and people are saying they can't put up with the pain quite young, and they don't know what to do. Sometimes even the neurosurgeons, there's one particular one, he's not alive anymore, Dr. Oliver Sacks, and he wrote all these case studies and some of the phantom limbs. So even after the limb was no longer there, they still had the pain from that situation. So once again, these are all different studies which later we can discuss, like in Bali, what's happening here. There's a lot of research. They're using all these things on the brain, even with breath work, and going into some of these changes. But transforming pain into growth, transcending that, and using all the tools for this.
Yeah, agreed. So I guess my next question for you guys is what do you kind of see, the two of you, I think it's a good team, bringing to Bali? Kind of what do you see, how you're going to bring it? What are your thoughts there?
I'm very happy that for what I see, Bali is ready. Bali is the great place for this practice to grow. When you really see to treat a patient and not just the disease, when you really want to see the person as a whole, not just about the physical body. So I taught about palliative care about 2 years ago in some places in Bali, and I see they are eager for this. And so that's why I started the service for now in Siloam Bali, and then we're going to spread to more places to make this accessible for people to get their pain relieved, in understanding that pain is beyond just about the physical part, but the whole biopsychosocial part of the human. And also for, because I also see some examples in end-of-life care, sometimes with this technology, with all the medicalization, even they have a term medicalization of dying, that you shouldn't die. That with all the machines available, you shouldn't die. When your heart is not working, the machine will do for you. When the lung is not working, the machine do for you.
You know, in the U.S., I would say that I've seen this where they're keeping somebody alive and they just barely die, and it's like, I don't know if it's a service to them at all.
Yeah.
You know, like I think it's how to die with dignity, though, is I think important.
Exactly. I think with the technology, we love it. It has helped a lot of people. But in a way, when you technologize, you medicalize everything, including dying process, which should be natural. I mean, 50, 100 years ago, people die at home, surrounded by their loved ones, in the most natural way possible. Not with all these tubes attached to their bodies, this distant from all the people, and having their heart crushed in the very last seconds. What I try to see, I'm not condemning that, because there are instances where CPR actually life-saving, but in terms of a natural ways of dying, there are more peaceful ways for it. So that's what I hope to bring in Bali itself. Let's return, because I believe the Balinese, with their spirituality of the balance with the nature, human, and even the gods, with all this balance with the nature and all, they know that it's supposed to be a natural process. But what we can do is to help in those journey, keep it natural, but keep it free from suffering with the modalities that we have, including about art. So, thank you.
Yeah, awesome.
I guess for me, I'm looking forward to how arts can start to coexist alongside healthcare in Indonesia. I'm not sure if it's something that is very common here, but because back where I used to practice in Singapore, there was something that is just about to start. I think it's just gaining traction. Art therapists, they are just, there's more of us there, and then we are also starting to introduce artists in the community into healthcare institution, because they have a lot bigger repertoire than what we can provide. And I think arts also belongs to people. It is essentially how civilizations get remembered. So for me, it's really, because I'm also a foreigner, there's only so much I can do. But I am hoping to really use my own training and my own experience and expertise to hopefully be able to bridge arts into a healthcare system. Of course, right now the focus is still more on grief and bereavement support, but I do look forward to explore about arts in a more community setting, and hopefully through that, because there's already a very rich creative culture here, be it through words, through body movements, through traditional art forms. So it's really about how we can actually introduce that into the healthcare system, because you will need a whole different language to describe or to explain arts or the benefits of it to medical professionals. So that has been a point of discussion within the art therapies community back in Singapore. And I also don't know if there are many art therapists based in Bali or in Indonesia per se. So hopefully, I think as we move forward and alongside this Health Hub platform, more people would be able to identify themselves or, express interest, so that we can actually have this bridge happening.
Yeah. So what's happening? Yeah, so as far as arts are concerned, in Bali, or say, I'll give you two examples. One is actually pulled from Australia, where the Aborigines, and they use their dot art. And I know that was already used back then, decades ago, with the cancer patients and that. So sometimes going from big to something very small, you can go beyond the pain just to go back on some of our other conversations. Another thing for Bali is the number of nationalities are here. People are coming with all their knowledge and expertise. We have psychotherapists, say from Russia. They're already working with psychoimmunotherapy, but also other type of art therapy with the brain, where the brain and our body actually holds the answers. And they use a technique where they can draw, and from that, people get the answers to things. And then, we can go on and on, going beyond the pain. But that's the retreats. They're medically informed retreats, regardless of which country you're from. We can go in and give support to people and guide them as navigators.
Cool. I kind of finished on the last takeaway here, the scope of what Bali has to offer for the trauma-informed journey and support available here. And I think that everybody here, Bali has its own energy. That's, to some degree, that's what drew me here. And I think a lot of people, that's why people come here in itself, of like drawn Mother Bali. I've heard the term that Bali is the mother of ayahuasca. And not exactly in the same way. Sure, but it's not available here. But it's in the fact that it's not the same way. But the energy here has something that can transform you.
It's a catalyst, yeah.
It's either spit you out or it would allow you to stay here. So something like that. And going off that, what's a trauma-informed journey? How would you describe that?
I'll just say that there's a term coined at the moment, trauma-informed therapists, doctors, whatever, that wasn't around before. Before you were a body, you were treated a certain way, but there was no thought about your background, where you were from and what you were feeling. So within the medical profession, there's a rising awareness of this, and with all the testing, and that's what Bali. We've got time and space here to explore this, and they are experiential. And with Health Hub, we're really interested in practitioner-only events where they can experience these journeys. If anyone's got a question, to get ready for them.
Do you have anything for the trauma?
I guess if there's anything I want to talk about trauma-informed journey, it would be going back to how earlier I mentioned the whole idea that grief and trauma is very subjective. So the way I see it is, if it's a trauma-informed journey, then it is a person-centered journey. Because to treat or to support trauma journey, grief journey, you really need to go back to the person's subjective experience, and that is everything that matters. So essentially, it's what I believe a lot of practitioners are already trying to do, which is to go back to the person that they're journeying with. Yeah.
Maybe I just add up a little bit of what you were saying, because I've seen cases also like that what they feel now is beyond what we see now. It has something that has been ingrained many years even before that. Because, for example, there's a case of a lady with advanced cancer having a very bad abdominal pain. We tried to give the morphines and all kinds of medication. It helped her, but partially. There's still some pain there. He's been there for a while, and then later on, only after we journey with her and then we listen to her story and her personality, we know that she is grieving about what happened 30 years ago. She had an abortion. The guilt stays with her. It becomes a trauma, becomes a nightmare. She never tell anyone until at the end she's mentioned about it. So what we heard, maybe now people put it in the word of psychosomatic. It is not a joke. Psychosomatic is happening. So the pain, the guilt that she brought with the abortion, it translates in a way, it worsens her abdominal pain, and it's actually it's objective. You can measure it. We see from her, and after she get to resolve the emotional pain, the guilt, the grief, and the trauma, her pain level actually goes down, indicating that the dosage she needs for the opioids actually can go down as well. So in that sense, I do believe, and I have seen that we need to treat somebody beyond what we see now and beyond what our eyes can see. Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Are we ready for questions? All right. I know we had at least one over here. Sir, could we get the mic over there, please? Thank you.
Yes, hi.
Hello.
My name is Davide, and I have many questions. I'll try to cut down to one comment and one question, and maybe ask other questions later. So, the comment about David Goggins. David Goggins, sometimes is inspiring. I use it in the gym, but this gentleman was sexually abused by his parents and is a very extreme individual. So it's very easy to say, do something difficult every day and painful. I don't think I like him, but I don't think he's an equanimous kind of person. So what is the goal? The goal is equanimity. And there are times where we need to do something difficult, but other times that you are telling yourself to do something difficult, and then you are not compassionate to yourself, and it's not helping your state of mind. So I think the key is to be self-aware and to be self-compassionate. I don't think David Goggins represents a self-compassionate mood. That's my comment. Now, the question, I have many questions, but the first question is, we are in Bali and I drive motorbikes every day. I'm sure you've noticed that the driving in Bali is following our lizard brain, where we think we need to be somewhere as fast as possible. I was in a group of men workshop, and somebody saw somebody dying by motorbike, and two of my guest house neighbors had accidents. So I don't know, maybe it's not for this panel, but it's something that we need to be aware of. There are many foreigners here, and I'd like to know how many die every year. And their parents are away, and it's their final hours here alone. Can we think about something for this Balinese situation, and not the sort of expensive, palliative care of people who fly here and go into five-star resort, which also has a place, I agree. But if you look out there and you can hear it, most people are in danger of passing away without their relatives here. So one suggestion I have is to create a system where everybody has some sort of emergency contacts, but also has the possibility to do a video call during the last few moments. And perhaps also, I don't know, I mean, this is I'm brainstorming, writing a document on what you would like your last few hours be like, because there's nobody around you, and then pull up that document. I'm thinking out loud. So there is a question in there, but a more practical question. What's the easiest way to do art for grieving? Is it coloring, one of those booklets which tells you to coloring? But my mind goes everywhere when I try and do that. Is there an easily accessible art for people who are not so artistic? Thank you for your time.
Thanks for the question. I'll go first and you can go next. I would say, so the studies that have been done recently show that if somebody's given a piece of clay and it's open-ended, create whatever you want. That's the key. Or if you're given a blank canvas and make something, go. It's just to do it. It's the act of doing it that make it special to you. Again, as he was saying, is like that's the uniqueness of just of executing it and going forward in some fashion. Nothing else matters. It's just do it. And that's from what the studies say, and that's from my experience as well. I'll hand it over to you.
Are there places in Canggu or Ubud where you can do that? Are there places in Canggu or Ubud where you can do that?
I believe in the group that we're in together that there are a few, I don't know them offhand, but I do know that there are a few businesses or something like that do kind of do that, where it's like come in, paint, create something, but not exactly tied to what we're doing. But yes, but to a degree, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My practice is based in Renon, Denpasar. I'm with Diamet Bali. It's a joint practice. There is a medical doctor, a hypnotherapist, acupuncturist, physiotherapist, and dermatologist. Yeah, so it's a joint practice, and we are just about to launch a grief support group, because it's different practitioners, so it's going to be a backed by a medical team in that sense. So maybe after this we can, I can share with you the contact. Okay, so what kind of art? It's going to be depending on the person. Unless it's like a group-based bereavement intervention or support, then there will be a more direct approach. So in that context, I would, for example, because art making sometimes is very intimidating. So normally my first session in a group, I have this term borrowed image. So I will actually bring in image cards so people don't feel intimidated trying to create something from scratch in front of a stranger that they have never met before and get judged by it silently afterwards, right? There's always this danger. So when you use a borrowed image, for example, a range of image cards, I would have an invitation. What represents grief for you? Of course, this image cards is not an image card, it's actually thought through. And then when they are able to hold that image in front of them and talk about it, it's already giving grief itself a form. And depending on the nature of the image that is being chosen, there could be a potential for connection with your loved one that's no longer there. But this is also a very introductory stage. I guess what I wanted to say is also it's very subjective. So if I am with someone who's grieving, to be honest, art wouldn't be the first thing that I will introduce, because I want to attend to the person. I want to ask about his or her state. It could be that the person just needs someone to listen to the pain, just to acknowledge the fact that it's a very, very shitty situation, very, very bad situation. We need to be able to acknowledge that this is not cool, this is not good, this is painful, this is chaotic. And what do you want to do next? I think when I run bereavement group, one of the fundamental thing that I keep highlighting is that grief has no timeline. The only timeline is your own timeline. The reason why grief supposedly have a timeline is because people want to make it convenient for them. People who is not grieving this loss, they want to make it convenient for them for reasons that we don't know. But fundamentally, take as long as you need. And that itself is the permission. So sometimes I think in grief, people need to be given permission to grieve. Whatever that could be. It can be a question. And sometimes to support someone who's grieving, the more practical things makes better sense. Like getting food, getting groceries done, getting laundry done, or just being there with them, or just a text message. I know I'm putting art therapists out of job, probably, but really, if you want to attend to the person, art may not necessarily be the first thing. It can come later, after the relationship with the person is being it's done. Unless it's a clinical situation when you are there for art therapy intervention, then I will use borrowed image first because of what grief can feel like, numbing. Looking at a white piece of paper, I think for me, I'm scared of a white piece of paper. Like how, if you want to write the first sentence, the first word is always the scariest, and then the first sentence is the scariest because everything builds on that. So that's my take.
Can I add if I can add a bit about what you mentioned. It's a great idea. Thank you for highlighting it. When we're reminded of death, we live better. What I had just also an idea about, I think of two things. First, maybe we can have Health Hub to facilitate maybe like a workshop or normalize talks like this that makes us think and plan. And the workshop about planning may be about making advanced care planning or living will or 5 wishes. How we can start to think about it and plan about it while we are healthy and good. So like you said, so people know, we know, our loved one knows what actually we want when we cannot speak of it. So I think that was the first idea. And the second is, like what you said, I do sincerely believe no one should die alone, because everyone never being born alone. At least you have your mother with you. So I believe no one also should die alone. It's just in my mind, if we can have like a group of people who want to volunteer for this cause, no one dies alone. When somebody is having nobody here and they have this concern, they want to become the contact person to help guiding them through this numbing experience, like what to do, what paper works, how to get access and help and all, like a companion through this journey until repatriation or until cremation. If we can have this group of people who are having this concern, because ultimately people take care, the foreigners will take care of each other as well, the locals as well. I do believe in this in the way of the good karma. You help somebody who are alone right now, one day when you need the help, you also will get help. So that's also another idea. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. So I'm really interested in whether all arts are equal, and if there are some arts that are more dangerous than others, and whether arts really heal. So I've spent the last 3 years writing a novel inspired by my ex-partner. It has both been a way to say goodbye for a very long time, incredibly painful, but also an opportunity for me to highlight the pain of someone and to write a book about the pain of men, in the hope that men will actually recognize their pain in a better manner, because I think that's very, very needed. And I write a lot of poetry, and I get inspired by joyful things, but also by trauma and stories as well. Now, there is a massive danger to the brain when you write again and again and again about the same things, and also when you perform the same story or the same poem, because it reignites the pain. So I'm interested, when you compare it to dancing, for example, or when you compare it to painting, where there is a sense of release and escape, maybe rather than healing, do you think that there are better modalities than others? And do you think that repeating the pain, even if it is through art, is actually really helpful?
Do you want to go first, or? Yeah. Well, so you touched on something interesting. So I think that art or creativity it's an expression, and as he was saying, it's subjective, and if it is helpful to you, then nobody can take that away. However, there's a term called Hebbian associative learning, in the sense that neurons that fire together stay together. And this is kind of going into neuro-linguistic programming, in the sense that if you are constantly circling back and you go into this like anxiety and depression onto a specific event, then you have the potential to gain more neurons or more traction or more myelin in that similar area. So the potential is there. It's very subjective, but my base thought is that if you're creating out of love and compassion, then that is what, that is like that joy and putting it back into the world. So I would say, but part of it, I don't know. I mean, it's so subjective. It's kind of hard. That's a good question.
When you're creating art, you create it to release trauma.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have compassion in your head when you're painting. A lot of people are getting rid of their dark emotions through painting, through movement, because there is a lot of release of pain. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I think it can be both.
Okay.
It's not. It can be both of them.
We have evidence that it's truly healing, or is it just a release or an escape?
I think it's both. So that's my thought.
There are enough academic papers to prove that it works, but back to the whole idea of subjectivity, right? Art forms is very, very much tagged to a person's personal experience. How you choose to express yourself, nobody can say that is wrong, because I remember when I was doing my fine arts program, we have a class of 13 artists and everybody works differently and everyone is correct. So that itself, it's also a reminder that any form of expression is correct. So sometimes when I get a question, so what kind of art do you do with your clients? My response would always be whatever they want to do. This is always true because sometimes I remember people hate art. I came across this lady who just tells me that don't bring any art materials into my face because I hate it. How I got around it, she loved flowers. So there's flowers in her room, and then we ended up doing weeks of flower arrangement, and we know flowers will die. So that became the material that I needed. Impermanence. How a natural material became the topic of conversation, how a material that doesn't last forever became the vessel to talk about death. So for her, it's not art that works, it's whatever. So if we look at it from I'm an installation artist primarily, so how we see the environment as an extension of ourselves, the materials, the things that we put around us, those are potentially art materials too. So what art form is better than others? I don't think there's any. It goes back to the person's subjective or preferred experience. Because I remember people who prefer to process thoughts by writing. And poetry is also a form of medicine. It's been published, and people do apply that in medical setting too. And who is to say that music, poetry, or art is better than another? It's supposed to coexist as one because of who the person is and how they use the medium for themselves.
Yeah, so in the end, it's not even about art. It's the art of living, the art of getting better, healing, whatever. It's about life. So within health, we've got 9 levels. The first of all is to reset and restore, find out what our baselines are, and then that journey is an art. Everything becomes an art. It gives new meaning to living. It's not just about waking up, going to school, getting married, having a job, etc. We're here in Bali learning a new way to wake up and live.
Maybe just adding a bit from medical point of view, revisiting is not always bad because of 2 things. One, your brain needs time to really learn that something has happened. Neuroplasticity takes time. So for example, like you said, the phantom limb, you've been having this hand for decades, suddenly it's gone, but your brain still thinks that you have the limb. So also with where I've been living, for example, with my mother for 30 years and suddenly she's gone. It takes time for my brain to also to reset that, reflect. When I feel something painful, I scream, "Mom." Yeah, it takes time. So revisiting is not always bad in that sense. And the second thing is, from what I know, I'm not a psychiatrist, but from what I know, one of the therapy is exposure therapy. So actually you're exposed to the trigger. Like, for example, there's the story of this one fire dancer. Her mom was burned in a house, trapped in a house and burned by the fire. She lived with it, but then one day when she discovered the fire, at first she's scared of the art of the fire dancing, but then when she learned to dance around it, it empowers her to control the very thing that trigger her pain. So in that sense, we can revisit, but like you said, in a different frame, in a different manner. It itself is an art.
Okay, I wanted to add about fire because I have had the privilege to journey with burns survivors. And what is fascinating is that this lady that I'm journeying with, she uses fire as a medium, and the medium that she works with is bandage. So she makes flowers with bandage, and then she lit the bandage on fire. So what is left behind is essentially the ashes. So because bandage it's made in a certain structural form, so the structure stays, but when you touch it, it dissipates. So the fact that she's able to use a medium that scarred her, that itself is quite something. It speaks about the resilience that she has built over the years, and this resilience to be able to use the same medium that scars her. And of course, the introduction of using medical materials is intentional. That is the art therapy directive.
All right. Any other questions around? Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Charmel, and I am a certified integrative wellness coach and a doctor of functional and integrative clinical nutrition resident. And I'm also an artist. So this particular topic is very important and interesting to me because I do deal with stress management with a lot of my female patients, and I realize that a lot of their stress management is rooted in trauma. And I want to be able to incorporate various forms of art into helping them manage that trauma and stress management. So I do have two questions, actually. First, are there art or specific colors that coincide with alleviating certain symptoms or conditions? For example, is music better for certain conditions, or are there particular colors that support certain symptoms? That's the first question.
Sorry, ma'am. The first part of your question, it's...
Well, we don't need to repeat. The first part is, are there specific art or specific colors that coincide with alleviating certain symptoms or conditions? That's the first part of the first question. And then, like, for example, is music better for certain conditions, or are there, particular colors that support certain symptoms?
Music itself is a whole new field because we do have a professional a professional group of clinicians who are trained as music therapists. They would be the group of professionals you want to talk to about the clinical use of music to support different presenting symptoms. That is if we really touch on music, which I won't. But specific colors, sometimes colors can be an indicator for certain things about the human psyche. It can be an indicator, but what I wanted to say today is that our association with colors run on primarily three levels that I can think of. One is personal preference, one is archetypal, and one is cultural. So as a Singaporean Chinese, I'm going to use the context of black and white, right? Black, sometimes, most of the time, identify that a young person or adolescent, they are normally drawn to the color black because archetypally, that is a color that rejects. If we understand that developmental stage, Erickson's psychosocial developmental stage, when you are an adolescent, you are exploring boundaries, you are trying to understand yourself, you're trying to set yourself apart. So this is a very important stage, and then the association with the colors could suggest certain things, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything more than that until we have the conversation with the person. So this is why, as an art therapist, it's very important to keep talking with your client to understand why they use certain things and why they use certain things the way they use it. Because if not, what looks like something else in my head could mean something else entirely different. And that would be causing harm. I hope that answers your question.
That did answer. Can you hear me? Okay, that did answer my first question. Thank you. The second question was just, when you're having these art experiences with the patient, have you ever experienced individuals who feel more saddened by the art because they feel maybe guilt that their loved one can no longer enjoy it? And I say that because I've lost all three of my parents, which is how I got into this field as a second career. And one of the first grieving experiences that I felt when I went back out to, at the time I was younger, so I went out to a club and I immediately started crying in that space, in a space that would have made me feel, rejuvenated and fun and, happy. But the music and the dancing and the environment just that quickly after the loss of my father and my mother at the time, I was just saddened by that. And I broke down in tears and I had to leave, the building for that because I felt this strong sense of guilt that they could no longer experience that joy of dancing and the art and those things. So do you ever, when you're doing this therapy with them with art, do they ever feel more saddened, by that experience because of their associated trauma?
There is. Okay, I'm gonna address it first based on the group, the how client respond. When they feel saddened, it is an invitation to allow them to stay with this emotion, because a lot of time in day-to-day living, in how we live our life, we are not given this permission nor space. It is essentially means that the medium has brought them to a point that they are able to sit with this emotion. So when that happens, it would be appropriate for me to provide a psychological holding space to acknowledge if there's tears, or to acknowledge the pain, or sometimes to sit in complete silence, because silence speaks loud. Sometimes just being able to sit there and witness pain unfolding can be cathartic for the person grieving, because they don't get this. They don't get their pain witnessed. So if we go back to psychotherapy practices, that is why fundamentally the therapeutic relationship, it's very important. This is why when we practice in a safe clinical environment, it allows the client to have this cathartic release. So instead of offering tissue, most of the time I will let them know where the tissue is. If they want, they can reach out for it. If not, we will just stay with the intensity of the experience. Of course, we will close the session to make sure that they are safe enough before we let them off. Second point, I got into this profession because I've lost both my parents. So to acknowledge your experience in the club, what I wanted to highlight is also when grief happens, we not only grieve the past, but we also grieve a future without this person. This is very important because sometimes people forget that I am going to live a life without this person there. The void cannot be replaced, and it shouldn't. It cannot be replaced, and it shouldn't. So allow yourself to stay with it. And for practical takeaways, when I run bereavement group, on day one and all the way to the end of the session, I would always remind them that your grief, it's the same weight. It doesn't reduce, but what changes is how you carry it. So I will use, for example, I start carrying this heavy black ball with a plastic bag. And then I realize it doesn't hold the tension, right? And then I will try a tote bag, a canvas tote bag. Still, my shoulders strain. At some point, I will change into a backpack, a hiking pack, and then I can carry it better. What changes our capability to handle it? The weight is the same. The weight remains the same because of what it means to us. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. That actually hit the second part. Actually, hit inside. I think it's the future of something about that part. When you said that part, the understanding not having them in the future. I think that was what hit at the time and even now. Yeah. So thank you.
Well, Calvin, that was well said. Good point to finish off. Awesome. Well said. And I believe we have a video, or are we good on that?
No.
Okay. All right. I think that's it. Anything else? Any last stuff? But all right. Well, thank you so much for coming out, everybody. Appreciate it. Yeah. And thank you guys for being up here. Appreciate it. Yeah. All right.
Thank you to Rob as well.
Oh, and thank you, Rob. Is he watching right now? All right. Cool.
Yeah, we'd like to say thank you to Tropical Nomad for hosting this, and also for the effort that Rob's put in these last years to bring us all together and create this space that we can all share these conversations that do matter, and also giving back to Indonesia and Bali as well.
All right. Thank you, Rob. And signing
Yeah.
off. See ya.
So we need a picture. Yeah.
Before everyone goes,